Hello, good afternoon. It is a great pleasure to be here today at the Global Episcopal Mission Network. My name is David Searby. Today I'm going to speak on two broad issues. One is the general experience that I've had with public-private partnerships. I'm going to try to make it from a point of view that nonprofits can appreciate. Now, generally, when you talk about public-private partnerships, you're talking about the partnership between a public sector entity and a private sector entity. But in this case, I'm trying to make it so that folks who work with nonprofits like faith-based organizations can get something good out of this. So the other thing I will talk about general lessons learned in public-private partnerships through the 27 years I've had with the State Department, exposure at the United Nations, in various positions where I was supporting public-private partnerships via a press role and sometimes initiating and creating them and executing them. So one of the main ways that I have worked over my career with the State Department with public-private partnerships has been in teaching English. This is a very important area for faith-based organizations to understand as a potential service project that faith-based organizations do. Sometimes we think of the only way I can help is if I'm hammering on a building. But English programs are amazing. They are the great social equilibrators in many countries. If you give a young person or an older person who doesn't have English the ability to move up slightly in their English speaking capabilities, you have impacted their lives. They get better jobs. If you give them the ability to be inspired and actually learn English fluently, you have opened up careers such as lawyer, engineer, doctor that would have been permanently shut to them no matter how smart they are, no matter how much they can get educated. That English really can make a difference in a person's life. So that's why the U.S. Embassy around the world, and that's why the U.S. government places a major impact on teaching English. And some of the really wonderful English teaching programs and partnerships that I've been involved with, had the fortune to be involved with, when I was working with the U.S. Embassy in Panama, we work with the Panama Chamber of Commerce. It's called the Panama America Chamber of Commerce, known as Pan Am Cham. This is our ambassador, the lady in the green, and officials from the Pan Am Cham. We came together to put together a scholarship program for employees and the children of employees of Pan Am Cham companies. Pan Am Cham was in it because they wanted to raise the level of English in their companies and in their country and lead by example to make Panama more competitive. The U.S. Embassy was supporting this for the same reason, but we also had another motive, another interest, and that was we know that people who speak English and learn English and read English learn more about the United States. And while there's some things that you maybe not want the whole world to know about the United States, we feel that on balance, this is a win for us. And the more you learn about the United States, the more you like the United States more, hate us less. So that's one of the reasons why we support. We feel it builds bridges, it allows people to communicate, it allows people to come together. This was a great program that was supported by another public-private partnership. The scholarships we gave out that Pan Am Cham and the U.S. Embassy funded together were in the Center for English Language Immersion, which itself was a nonprofit created in partnership between the United States Embassy in Panama and the Universidad Latina de Panama. Private sector, public sector came together to create a nonprofit. The goal of CELI was to provide high quality, low cost English teaching targeting an audience of the middle class and poor in Panama. Again, to give them that ability to learn English and move up and create social mobility in the country. It still exists today. It's a wonderful opportunity, and the U.S. Embassy is constantly using it to create opportunities for exchange. Not to, send propaganda. I think the folks are a little too smart for that, but just to share our culture, share the beauty of the United States, some of our challenges, issues of racism, things like that we found in our country, and we found it very beneficial to start dialogues and create understanding through the CELI. Now, Where was the public sector? Where was the Panamanian government until that point? Well, to that point, there really wasn't a lot of cooperation between, sometimes yes, but there wasn't a lot of cooperation between the United States Embassy and the Panamanian government. Panamanian government had some English language programs, but they would often try to do it all themselves. And until in 2014, when a new government came in and created Panama Bilingüe. So in Panama Bilingüe, which is of course headed by the government of Panama, there's a real effort to involve the private sector, nonprofits, outstanding nonprofits that have experience in teaching and managing English programs, and other governments. In this case, the United States Embassy is strongly supportive of Panama Bilingüe. We were proud to support the effort of the Panamanian government. And I would say that this not only results in a better program, it results in a program that more likely will last the next political change of administration. Because if you don't try to take all the credit yourself, then you're making it less political, and you're sharing the responsibility, and the next government, if they want to toss it out because it was associated with you, they might think twice before they do that, if it's working. And so far, there's every indication that Panama Bilingüe is working. Another amazing public-private partnership that I had the luck to be involved with when I was the press officer in the U.S. Embassy in Santo Domingo was a partnership between three different actors. One was the U.S. Embassy, U.S. Agency for International Development. The second was Major League Baseball. And third was the Major League Baseball Players Association. Now, we, the U.S. Embassy, had a strong interest in increasing the number of resources going to programs, and we wanted more people involved, and we wanted more exposure for the work that we were doing so they would gain support and keep on going. The Major League Baseball had a strong interest in seeing that baseball became a tool for development in the country. It's not just good public relations for them. They end up with better baseball players who are better educated and better to withstand the pressures of Major League Baseball. Better English language when they reach the United States. Better able to adapt. The Major League Baseball Players Association had a wonderful situation where you're talking about people who come from humble backgrounds, suddenly with lots of money, and they're getting knocks on the door, calls from friends, hey, let's set up a nonprofit. But the nonprofit, let's face it, wasn't really directed at helping people or helping a cause. It was helping the friends and family who were asking you to set up the nonprofit. Well, the baseball players who really wanted to help their country came, and we came into a deal where the baseball players would put in some money to the Dominican Development Alliance. The U.S. Embassy would bring, and through USAID, would put in money. And the result was excellent programs. Many of us were focused in the areas where the baseball players came from, so they were happy about that. Everybody's a winner, and the baseball players got to politely tell their friends and family, no, I'm not setting up my own nonprofit. I just gave $500,000 to this opportunity. Again, another public-private partnership that exists to today and is very successful. This is the one that I love the most. I had the most fun involving with this. This is Super Chef Panama. Back in 2012, I had a conversation with the head of marketing for Marriott, the hotel Marriott, and I asked her, well, what do you want to do? She was also the head of the Council for Promoting Tourism. She said, I want to promote culinary tourism in this country. I said, well, I want to help show Panamanians the importance of investing in their youth and creating youth opportunity. What do we do? So we came up with the idea of a Top Chef style show, a cooking competition devoted to underserved youth. And 16 kids from around the country, picked regionally, who've all participated in a government training program because they're underserved, came and competed. It's in its 4th year. It's a wonderful success story that I'd love to try to get other countries to emulate, including my own country. We'll just watch a little bit of it to see what it's about. It's in Spanish, but this is the culinary school that donated the prize, which is a scholarship, and that's hosted in the Holiday Inn. So all these kids come from 18 to 24 from government training programs for underserved youth. Saying I'm proud to be from Las Tablas. So you get this regional competition where people start.
nombre es Carlos Manuel Celaya Cuervo y represento al sector San Miguelito, Paraíso.
San Miguelito is a very tough neighborhood in Panama. He's proud to be from San Miguelito. So what you're going to see here, one of the top chefs in Panama. Look at all the sponsors. So the reason this came together and continues to this day is everybody did what they do best. A TV show called Tu Mañana came on and edited it and turned this into a top quality event. Nobody does a lot of work. Everybody does what their specialty is, and it ends up becoming a very sustainable project in the end. So what are the general lessons that I'd like to share from my experience with public-private partnerships before we move on to the voluntourism sector? First of all, public-private partnerships can bring additional resources to the table. That's very important. But beyond that, they can bring an expansion of the beneficiaries. Instead of a project only targeting a certain sector of society, by bringing in more actors, you tend to have a project that benefits the wealthy, the middle class, and people in the lower class, and that's very important for sustainability. Another important part of public-private partnerships benefit is the idea of innovation. When you bring different people to the table, you get different ideas. So it doesn't matter whether the idea comes from the public sector, the private sector, or the nonprofit, but you get new ideas and you get new ways of doing the work you've been doing for years. Another important advantage is additional oversight, new ways of oversight. You think you're looking at a project and catching what's going on? It's so great to have a different perspective, a person who can fill you in on what you might be missing. And finally, the ability to market your successes is extremely important because you want to be able to show all parts of society that you're having an impact, and so that's helpful. Now, there's some problems with public-private partnerships. First of all, and probably most important, is just you're talking about organizations with entirely different cultures that come from different areas with different backgrounds. In addition to that, you have organizations that have fundamentally different interests, risks, benefits, or goals and interests. So they see it in different points of view. The other area is the transparency and openness levels. How much do you share information? The private sector tends to be very closed and they share as little as possible. The public sector, for very many reasons, shares a lot more. These partners need to work together. And finally, the decision making is very different. Public sector, slow. Decisions can change. Private sector usually wants to make a decision and move on it fast. These are the kinds of differences that you need to put into. The one major takeaway I would say is to do a risk-benefit analysis with your partners, either formally or do it by yourself, but make sure that you are absolutely aware of what you think your partner's trying to get out of it, what you want to get out of it, and what you see the perils are and what they see the perils are. There needs to be a lot of communication on this to prevent surprises from happening. So let's move on to the area of voluntourism. Now, voluntourism I define as basically the use of a regular vacation to bring people into some sort of activity that's volunteering or some sort of volunteering activity that benefits a cause. It's often called social impact travel. It is a $2 billion market around the world, and it's growing. And most recently, Carnival Cruises instituted a program where 1 week they go to the Dominican Republic, the next week they go to Cuba, 1 week to the Dominican Republic, next week to Cuba, with port calls of 3 days in both places. So this is an area that's definitely growing, and people are starting to look at the ways of connecting regular vacations, popular vacations, with volunteer activities. So what I'm proposing is a new model based on hotels, where I'm very fortunate to be partnering with the Dominican Development Group, the development arm of the Episcopal Church in the Dominican Republic. We're developing a partnership right now, along with other actors in the Dominican Republic, including a great tour operator down there who's going to be working with us. Some of the sort of, let's take a step back and look at this from a sort of a biblical standpoint. Why should we be thinking hard about voluntourism? Why should the Episcopal Church be doing this? And I think that one of the easy answers is that we as church members, as Christians, are expected to bring Christ into our life at all points. And if we kind of put areas that are kind of excluded, that's not really what we've been called to do. One of the ways that we've been taught is to preach with deeds. So I think that doing voluntourism, if it's done correctly, is a way to preach with your deeds. But another very important biblical principle, which I would encourage people to think about and apply to voluntourism, is the quote also from Matthew, when going out into the world, "Be as wise as serpents, but as harmless or as innocent," depending on the translation, "as harmless or innocent as doves." Because the fact of the matter is, you can go out with voluntourism and have excellent intentions and either not do a lot of good or actually do harm. Because there are big problems in voluntourism. There are major problems in voluntourism. The most important, I believe, and this is true for all the voluntourism outfits out there, some of whom are doing very, very good work, don't get me wrong. There's public, there's private ones, there's nonprofit ones doing great work in the Dominican Republic, all over the world. I think their biggest problem is that their marketing tends to portray you, the volunteer, as the hero, tends to portray you, the person who's going to come in and save the day. That, if not handled correctly, can lead to kind of elements of cultural imperialism, of looking down on people instead of building partnerships, instead of working with people on a level of equality. That is a real danger. But it's very hard for when you're marketing that way to get away from that danger. It can be done, but it's challenging. The other issues that come up are often in voluntourism are poor sustainability. You do a project that was geared to making a volunteer feel good. But in the end, when the volunteer gets on their bus and goes away, 2 weeks later, there's nothing there. This happens all too often. And finally, you can also have actual harm caused by voluntourism. Beyond the sort of looking down on people, you can take jobs away. If you're not careful in the construction project, you can actually steal jobs away from locals instead of creating them, which is terrible. You can, in the worst of cases, and there's notorious cases of orphanage voluntourism gone awry, particularly in Cambodia. There's probably some good cases too, but Cambodia is notorious for having certain orphanages hire out children from their families to pretend they're orphans, to look miserable and impoverished in order to get more money from volunteers who are coming in. That's the last picture there. The Episcopal Church has a lot of advantages, I believe, to do voluntourism right. First of all, there's a worldwide reach. So first of all, the ability to go out there, not just in the Dominican Republic, not just my company, but with reputable other tour operators who can set these things up in nice hotels, is the fact that you can reach worldwide. And you have lots of good causes around the world that just need people to show up with the right frame of mind, the right program, with their time and their money that they donate, they can make a difference. The second reason the Episcopal Church, I think, is going to be very good is that they're trusted and experienced. Those are kind of different but kind of similar. They're trusted because they're experienced, I believe. And in addition, they're trusted because many people, not just people of faith, believe that faith-based organizations use donations more effectively and more efficiently, and I believe that's actually true in practice. But you can bring non-Christians and non-Episcopalians onto trips that support your church with very little effort in many cases. And finally, I think the Episcopal Church is exceptionally networked. It has connections to the public sector, it has connections to the private sector, and it's wise enough to know that at times it makes sense to partner with other nonprofits. Great nonprofits understand that it's not a zero-sum game, that you can share the limelight with another nonprofit, and you benefit and your work benefits and everybody benefits. The other reason I think that the church ought to look very carefully at this is, again, studies have shown, there was an excellent study by Travel Cares, the philanthropic arm of the travel industry from last year, that shows that there's enormous demand with families and with millennials that's unmet in the area of voluntourism. And churches and the Episcopal Church can use voluntourism to reach out to these segments of the marketplace, to introduce them to the work. And as somebody said yesterday, we really want to show people what missionaries do. We want to bring people who otherwise would not see what missionaries do and kind of get that wow moment. Now, you won't get the wow moment from every single person, but this is one of the main reasons we should be doing this, because we're not trying to replace existing church missions that are going down there, replace the work of missionaries. We're trying to build and complement on that. And I believe if you get people with the right spirit to see people in action, you can actually get people encouraged to come back and stay for a longer time and take a full church group down there. So again, the new voluntourism model that I'm proposing, that the Episcopal Church looked very closely at, is built on creating something that is more fun and more sustainability. It's more, there's more demand because you're in nice hotels, and actually you folks are probably the exception to the rule that you take vacations without grading it. But a lot of people really want to be in a good hotel when they're on their vacation. It is actually a deal breaker. And if you're in a family, if 4 of the people are willing to stay in a bad hotel and 1 isn't, that's the deal breaker for the 5th person. This allows you to bring people with different interests onto the same trip. The second reason is actually, ironically, the model that I'm proposing actually has lower costs. The other voluntourism organizations out there, some of which again are doing great work, they have surprisingly high costs because they have a lot of staff that they have to pay off very few people who are coming. So they have each unit cost of the trip is very high because they've got a large staff to pay. Ironically, the model that I'm proposing actually ends up being cheaper. And we're much more focused on people-to-people engagement. Our programs are going to incorporate that in every program where you learn about the locals and the locals learn about you. That's a very important way to show that this isn't poverty. This is about people-to-people engagement, partnership, and hopefully some long-term relationships. Now, on the sustainability side, there's a hashtag called Mend Not End. If you want to learn more about the problems in voluntourism, you can search for that. And they go into a lot of the problems that I've addressed. And I believe every single problem that I've ever seen in the Mend Not End movement, the model that I'm proposing that the Episcopal Church look at, it addresses. One of the things that the model does to remove sort of the culture of dependency problem is the pay-it-forward concept. The Dominican Development Group, way before I ever started talking to them about the pay-it-forward concept, was instituting the pay-it-forward concept in the Dominican Republic. They had anybody who benefited from the Dominican Development Group was expected to give it back to someone else. Not to somebody out of their own self-interest, but to help somebody or help society in general in a way that wasn't out of their own self-interest. That gives people a feeling of power that they're not receiving charity. The other issue is because the costs are lower, you actually are able to provide more direct funding to the project. The transparency of making the donation to a 501c3, an IRS-approved official U.S. nonprofit, completely separate from the rest of the vacation is a very big difference from the vast majority of voluntourism out there, including ones that are doing great jobs. They tend to fold the donation into your overall costs, and when you ask them, how much of the money I gave to you went to the cause, a lot of them can't or won't tell you. And finally, the partnership potential. The fact that you're working, especially with great hotels, allows the hotels to be your partner and market your project and get the word out there simply by trying to sell their own hotel rooms. So there's a natural way that you can each support each other with media and social media at no cost to either one. So again, working with the Dominican Development Group, I feel very lucky that I found this partner we're developing. We're hoping to start operations this year in the Dominican Republic. And finally, the lessons learned. Again, the biggest lesson, of course, is that real partnership is what leads to sustainability. When each group, each actor brings to the table something that they're specializing in, that's when you get the real partnership. Between the public sector and the private sector, hope I don't offend any government people here, but the private sector is the key. Really, they're the actor that in the end is the indispensable actor for somebody in the nonprofit world. Now, does that mean you align yourself with, you ignore the public sector? No, you're very conscious of what's going on in the public sector, especially politically. Politicians have a way of surprising you. If you're not aware of local politicians are thinking, your whole project could be in jeopardy. So you at least have to be aware. So when do you involve the public sector? Well, you involve them at the right moment, especially when you've got something up and running and successful. That would be a great moment to think about it, adding on that extra layer of support. But one key is always try to strike the balance between being apolitical, not being perceived as somebody that's only aligned with one party or another. And here's the trick. Sometimes you have to bring public sector people into your events where you are having a ribbon cutting or you're doing some big media event, and you've got to have that public sector official next to you, and you say, we couldn't have done it without you, when of course they did nothing. But you've got to do that because that's what makes people happy. But again, this isn't easy. If you're picking up on the idea that balance is not easy between being apolitical and giving credit to the public sector. And finally, if you're going to do something that's long term, try to seek cultural change. Try to find some way that you can get into the heads of the people who benefit from your projects and change something over time, because if you are creating something that lasts, you can actually create cultural change over time. So finally, just to reiterate, what I am proposing is that the Episcopal Church takes a serious look at voluntourism, and that we encourage every Episcopalian to one time in their lifetime, either through a regular church group, those are wonderful, or through some sort of volunteer vacation that's less traditional, sometime leave your area of your Episcopal Church, go visit another Episcopal Church somewhere in the United States, overseas, wherever you can. Learn about them, share, create partnerships. And if we do that, I think that the Episcopal Church will have taken a step in the right direction. Thank you very much. And I'd be delighted to take some questions. I don't know how much time we have. I think we have a bit of time.
Sure. Just on the sustainability part, can you talk about that a little bit more? How is it that people going on a 3 or 4 day stay in somewhere are actually able to do something that's going to be sustainable? I didn't get the connection there.
You're absolutely right.
How's that different from walking away from a project that might not have been completed?
You are absolutely right. That is a great. I'm so glad you answered that question. The reason it is sustainable is kind of on the one hand, the BeachCorps model or motto is a little grain of sand. We say you, the volunteer, are a little grain of sand. You are nothing. If one little grain of sand by itself is nothing. But if you are part of a larger movement that's all moving in the same direction and building over time, you can have an effect. So what you have there, and the reason that's not just gibberish and propaganda, is because we only support activities that are backed by established 501c3s in the United States. So while your 2 or 3 days vacation or days of volunteering, say you go down for a 7-day vacation, and say you do 2 or 3 days of volunteering, that's not going to have a lot of impact. No, it won't. But if you are part of a chain where your time, the time of many people, your money and the money of many people are slowly building towards outcomes, you can have an impact. One of the examples is like an English language program. An English language program can easily be designed over 8 weeks over a summer vacation when schools are out and parents need something to do. An English language program can get kids 8 full weeks of English, significantly increase their English, and while your 2 or 3 days didn't have impact on that kid, at the end of those 8 weeks, many of those kids, maybe not all, will have been measurably improved in English.
So are those kids going to have a succession of 2 or 3 day teachers throughout their 8 weeks?
Well, for example, over a summer program, what you would do is you would front end the first 8 weeks with you'd find this is what we're working on right now, finding a nonprofit down there, a funder who would fund the first 8 weeks, and that would be guaranteed. So that's all done. So you have an 8-week program that's all paid for. Then you market the opportunity to help the kids to a series, exactly as you said, a week of volunteers for 3 days, they leave. Next week, for 2 or 3 days, another set of volunteers come in. For 8 weeks straight, you have 8 different sets of volunteers come in. with their time and their money,
English with the kids.
overseen by a local Dominican teacher. So you're creating a job for that teacher, and you have a professional teacher who gives the orders and not untrained people. They're simply being broken up into different groups by the skill level of the children, and in small groups reading books and only doing what teachers say under the strict supervision of a teacher. That would be what an English program could look like.
So is your organization going to focus specifically on English instruction?
It'll be one of the projects. We would probably not start out with that because it's complex. We are going to start out with exactly what the church is doing already, essentially bringing people into the work of the Dominican Development Group, giving the Dominican Development Group a chance to explain itself through interactive exchange games where the Americans or the foreigners learn about the Dominican Development Group, the local Dominicans learn about the foreigners and where they're coming from. Everybody learns about each other, and then you either do some hammering or you go play baseball. That's another possibility. But it's that people-to-people exchange and empowerment. The two key principles, the program has to empower the cause, and that's why you need flexibility. You need to be able to say, hey, by the way, we know you signed up for a painting project. Guess what? It's raining. You're not painting. You're doing this instead. And if you prepared the volunteer that they're not the center of attention, that they're just a little grain of sand, they will understand that it's not about them. They're not the hero. The cause is the hero.
But you might do painting programs also?
Oh yeah, you can do painting.
Painter in the Dominican Republic?
No, you know why? Because they supervise. And they love it. They sit back and they say, hey, you missed a spot. Hey, and they do the touch-up work and they make sure that it's done correctly. So I think that that's an important principle, that every construction project designed, and the Dominican Development Group has a lot of experience in this, is specifically designed to create jobs, not take them away. And it can be done if you're careful. But a lot of it involves making sure that the volunteer understands that. Not everybody may be painting, and some of them may be picking up trash. Some of them might be playing the boombox. Some of them might be the photographer of the group. You might have a designated photographer to go around and take photos. Any other questions? Well, listen, it's a real pleasure talking to you all, and I'm going to put this up on the internet, so you might be famous one day, or actually your applause will be famous. But I really appreciate you coming here and listening to this, and see you at the rest of the conference.